On today's episode of The Golden Bolt, I'm taking a look at a game that I've meant to review for quite a while now, 2011's crime drama LA Noire. Naturally, in a game so focused around police, it only makes sense to bring a buddy along for the adventure. So join me in welcoming Mini-Me to the channel. Hey Mini, you there?
Hey Bolt, is it true you copied JonTron?
What? No.
I have a testimony from a certain Sonic fan 07 saying that you do. Wait, don't you usually do story first in your reviews?
It'll make sense in due time, trust me. See, LA Noire is nothing without its presentation. The first and perhaps only thing you've heard about this game is its remarkable visuals, or rather, its remarkable facial animations. Using a proprietary technology creatively named Motion Scan, the developers at Team Bondi were able to render every twitch, wrinkle, and quirk on the faces of the actors.
The result is a true-to-life scan that provides a level of detail unheard of back in 2011, and one that's arguably not even been matched today. Even the highest AAA budgets have only recently caught up to LA Noire's efforts using meticulously pre-rendered cutscenes, but these models you're looking at are rendered entirely in real time.
And this motion scan technology isn't limited to just the main players either, as hundreds of actors were given the very same treatment as our hero Cole. Nor is it limited to cutscenes, these scans are used in every part of the game. Even 7 years later, I was floored when I saw Cole's jaw and neck moving naturally during an early shootout, when it clicked to me that this was actual gameplay.
That's not to say the faces are always natural. The second thing you've likely heard about LA Noire is that while the face scans are groundbreaking, they're also hilariously exaggerated. A byproduct of the scanning process was that actors more or less had to remain perfectly still, so that creates some oddities, and for whatever reason there's a heap of overacting. The result is, more often than not, a clear tell, an eye roll, a smirk, or this. We'll cover this more in a bit.
Speaking of eye rolls, is it just me, or do the eyes feel kind of dead in LA Noire?
Yeah, they always seemed off to me too.
From what I can tell, they're mapped from the motion scans with the rest of the face, but that lifelike glow is totally missing here. It's something that the game's contemporaries never had a huge issue with. Maybe it's seeing them matched up with such expressive faces, but it feels a little bit into the uncanny valley here. Another issue, before we move on from those face scans, is that they're not exactly well mapped onto the characters' bodies in-game. In most of the game's cutscenes, where the aspect ratio shifts to 21:9 to be more like a real movie, the action is also motion captured by the actors, but in-game you end up with a very clear disconnect between body and head. Sometimes it's when you see these superfluid faces in the same shot as stiff, rigid bodies. Other times the head seems to be mapped on at a slightly wrong angle. And then there are some characters that just sort of jitter for some reason. No matter what it is, I usually can't shake that feeling that I'm watching these perfectly detailed faces mapped onto lifeless robotic husks. I'll take that as a trade-off for the sheer quality of these faces though, as there really is nothing like it.
If you thought the attention to detail would stop at the characters, you'd be wrong, as Team Bondi also meticulously captured the 1947 LA setting with an almost unheard of degree of precision. Some creative license is naturally taken to make the story work within this version of the City of Angels, but from the city's downtown to the dozens of landmarks, all the way down to the street names and car models, it's all handcrafted to be a playable slice of history. Even the cases themselves are usually adapted from actual crime cases that made LA news cycles during 1947. One thing I love in particular is that practically every sign, be it in the police stations or on the street or elsewhere, is legible. There's no blur here to fudge in some pseudo detail. That all said, there's just a certain romanticism that has been captured by Team Bondi's LA. Though it's certainly grounded in realism, it feels just as much like a Hollywood interpretation of LA in many ways, and with the noir influence this is certainly intentional. Maybe it's the overacting giving it a surreal vibe, but a lot can be attributed to the soundtrack, which is a combination of licensed era-accurate music and orchestral music inspired by 1940s film. And the effect of this soundtrack is very endearing and very film noir.
I have to give a lot of credit to the voice work too, as even though it starts off very campy, the actors are mostly spot on. You have all of your usual tropes here, but it all meshes well into the game's overall vibe. There are a few really strange cases though, where the voice is either cut off before they should in some scenes, or in one particular scene where the audio quality completely falls apart just for one character. I don't know if the mic setup was wrong for that guy and they just kept it in or what went wrong, but the volume, the room's background noise, it's all jarringly off. Now before we move on, there's one other thing we should address. We're actually playing two different versions of LA Noire. Minnie's tackling the original PS3 release, while I'm covering the convenient PS4 remaster because this game has an affinity for crashing certain fat PS3 models. And yours truly has one of those certain fat PS3 models. As far as I've seen, the differences between the two are marginal, what you'd expect from a 7th to 8th gen conversion. Higher resolution on textures, character models, and in this case faces, better visual effects and lighting, etc. However, one minor nitpick I have is that the color palette seems to have been grayed down a little bit for the remaster. Maybe it's just me, but I liked that slight tinge of color that I always saw when watching footage of LA Noire way back in the day. It certainly looks more accurate to the film noir aesthetic with these tweaks, but it's worth noting.
Regardless of which version you pick, you're almost certainly going to run into some bugs and noticeable holdovers of the PS3 and Xbox 360's limited power. Cole will transition suddenly from a jumping animation into his run, which is incredibly jarring. Trees will pop in at a distance, small chunks of floor geometry are infrequently missing when driving, and you can often see NPCs walking around at an incredibly reduced frame rate and resolution, despite not being all that far away from you.
These, along with your usual open-world gameplay bugs, are something to be expected, but they don't take away from the experience significantly. Like the faces, at worst they usually just make you laugh for a moment before coming back to the harsh reality of this city.
And that's just it. No matter how iffy LA Noire gets at points, it always comes back to the same conclusion, landing as a game that's absolutely stunning on all fronts.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that one. As goofy as the faces may be, I love them. They provide a real sense of character. Any small issues are more than overshadowed by the sheer detail in this game, and for that reason, LA Noire earns a golden bolt for its presentation.
Alright, so, tell me, Bolt, baby, why did we put presentation first?
It's simple, really. Just as we put the presentation before the gameplay, so did LA Noire. For all of its successes that we just touted, well, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's just dive right into it. This game is an open-world detective game slash third-person shooter. The game is broken down into over 20 cases across a handful of different departments, with each case following a similar structure. You'll find clues, interview and interrogate people, and work to catch the culprit.
Let's run through these mechanics in order. First up is the clue hunting, where you walk around waiting for your controller to vibrate and pick up random bottles that have nothing to do with anything. Alright, I mean, it's not usually that bad, but I can't stand these sections. I know they're necessary, and I'm not sure how they could have been done better, but they absolutely crash the pacing every time they come up, and they pop up a lot.
Credit where it's due, Team Bondi included a bunch of assist options for these sections, including a cue noise when you found every clue in the area or when you're near a potential clue, and a stronger visual hint system for those that really get stuck. I can't imagine turning all of these off though, because there are a lot of clues that are totally buried. Either way, they usually take a while to get through, and while at first I enjoyed these sections getting me into the detective mindset, very quickly I found myself tired of it. Cuffed hand in hand with the detective work is the real meat of LA Noire, the interrogations. Here you'll ask a list of questions to suspects, witnesses, or accomplices in order to dig more into the case or possibly charge a suspect. After each question, you'll analyze your evidence and decide whether to respond as a good cop or a bad cop, or if you're going to accuse the person of lying based on your evidence.
Wait, don't you mean truth, doubt, and lie?
Oh, yeah, that's arguably the biggest change between the original and remastered releases. For the remaster, in order to make the interrogations less ambiguous, the focus was placed back on Cole and the evidence you have on hand, as was originally intended. Right before the game's 2011 launch, the original coax, force, and lie were changed, which led to some rather strong mood swings from our protagonist.
Whenever you select doubt in the original version, Cole would often start shouting and insulting the person being questioned, which made him out to be kind of a dickhead. As a result, you tend to focus more on whether you can read a visual tick proving that the perp is lying, rather than thinking logically and using your evidence and comparing it against what you've been told.
I think the new version is probably the best option we could currently have, though it's certainly not perfect.
Even if the implicit focus is back on the evidence on paper, in practice it really does come down to judging faces the vast majority of the time, which sends a mixed message. What's the point of collecting all the evidence if it comes down to whether they'll make eye contact with you? For that matter, why are even the hardest of criminals so bad at lying? These people have the worst poker faces I've ever seen. So much of the evidence feels like it goes unused, it makes me feel like I'm just going through the motions where I'm hoping my mind thinks the same way as whoever wrote the scene, so that whatever logic stretches I'm going through are actually rewarded in the game. And even if I do get it wrong, most of the time the game progresses without any hiccups anyway. I'm pretty sure you can literally screw up every single interrogation and still finish the game. You can understand why they overused the acting for the interrogations since the face animation tech was basically included for this very reason, but in practice the implementation just isn't that well done. It's a real shame since this is by far the most unique part of the game.
Getting a question wrong can affect the score you receive at the end of each case, as well as potentially limit the options moving forward in that case if you don't receive the right testimonies. Likewise, while you can just skip it if you can't find that last clue in an area, you'll be limiting yourself moving forward if you don't dig for everything. There is one last option though to help players out in a pinch during either of these issues, and that is your intuition points.
As you complete cases, you'll earn experience and level up. Every time you level up, you'll gain 1 intuition point where you can have up to 5 at once. You can use these when clue hunting to help find remaining clues, or when interrogating to either remove an incorrect option or see what percentage of players picked which answer. These are a great help in a pinch, but even then they're not particularly needed because this game doesn't really have a difficulty curve. Cases later on are certainly longer than at the outset, but they're definitely not more difficult.
And speaking of easy, let's talk about the chase sequences, because these are some of the most brain-dead parts of any game I've ever seen. Occasionally, actually pretty friggin' often, a suspect will try and flee from you, either on foot or via car. Naturally, this leads to a pretty scripted chase sequence. Thankfully, you can end these chases early if you can catch up and take the suspect down ahead of schedule, but these just don't feel fun at all. When in a car, the suspect is clearly on a scripted path, to the point that even pit maneuvers don't work. In a game about being a cop, that's the one thing that I would think would work.
The on-foot chases, at least to me, look very exciting and often show off unique set-piece environments. However, just like so much of this game, they are so brain-dead simplistic. You hold down R2 on the right trigger to run and vaguely steer in the direction you want to gently move towards. The game jumps for you, it climbs for you, it pretty much thinks for you. I mean, this was a perfect opportunity to add in some exciting platforming mechanics, but instead we get the most bland chases possible.
That's the biggest sin that LA Noire has, I'd say. It scripts so much of what should be an unscripted game. There are sections where the game guides you down a set path forcibly. I cannot move off this path right now. This is the game doing all of this. I can't skip cutscenes at any point ever, even after a failed checkpoint. I can't decide what speed Cole runs at. If he wants to do a slow jog, I just have to deal with it. Hell, I can't even tell what the trigger is for him to switch between sprinting and jogging. What was the point of going through all of the trouble of designing this world if I'm going to have my handheld constantly when exploring it? What's the point of giving Cole a weapon when you can only use it when the game decides that it's gun time?
While we're talking about guns, the gunplay has some of the most egregious auto-aim I've ever experienced. If you're even close to aiming on the same half of a screen as an enemy during a shootout, the game will lock on for you because you wouldn't want a shootout to be stressful now, would you? Also, this is the light auto-aim setting. Apparently there's an even stronger one. I don't know how that's possible.
Oh, also there's hand-to-hand combat too, which is equally uninspired. In between all of this hand-holding, you'll probably do a lot of mindless driving around a totally empty city. Seriously, LA had hundreds of thousands of cars on the road by this point already. I checked, and at most you'll only see like 7 or 8 on the road. As beautiful and accurate as the city is, it's beyond disappointing that there's almost nothing to do in it. Yeah, there are some landmarks you can find, but with the exception of those used in missions, there's nothing to do when you get to them. There are collectibles too if you want to drive around aimlessly looking for them, but in my 18 hours playing the game, I didn't once find a film reel or a novel, and there's not really an incentive to go digging for them. While you're driving around aimlessly, your police radio sometimes goes off with a random street crime that you can tackle, one which is usually a few more minutes of mindless driving away. These are at least fun, but very early in the game, I got sick of driving and let my partner take the wheel, acting as a complete skip for all of the tedium between points A and B. Well, after they crash into a bunch of stuff, because the computer driving is just awful in this game. Your partners will hit stuff constantly, the pedestrians don't consistently pull over if your siren is on. It's just more frustration that this game didn't need.
While we're talking about driving, why are the cars so sensitive? Almost every vehicle has an incredibly wide turning radius, but even a tap of the analog stick jerks the car immediately. Now back in the 40s, power steering wasn't a thing in commercial vehicles. My family grew up owning a 1949 Ford Prefect, and this thing was an absolute slug of a machine. Turning wasn't a simple task by any means, which is why it's so strange that in LA Noire it's so sensitive and light. Cars don't feel right to drive at all in this game.
If the goal was to design a world that was not only historically accurate, but thematically appropriate for 1947 Los Angeles, they succeeded. Because this world is as vapid and soulless as Hollywood itself.
Sadly, that's true for much of the game as well. The pacing, the mission variety, it all falls apart about halfway in, and you're stuck with a bunch of tailing missions that make you want to bang your head against a wall. When LA Noire is good, it's incredibly good, but for the most part, the gameplay is just not here. It attempts so many different concepts, all of which are fine to fantastic in concept, but none of them ever really quite come together.
I hate that we have to slam this game this much too, because the parts we both like, we really like. But it's surrounded with so much poorly designed fat that it almost kills the experience. And that's not even covering the DLC, which is thrown for free into the remasters. The pacing was already kind of off before the DLC, with some divisions overstaying their welcome and others flying by, but with the DLC it might just be worse. The cases themselves are fine enough, but they add length to a game that was already a bit long in the teeth as it stands. I'd almost rather be able to skip the DLC missions outright in the re-release just so that I could come back to them later with a fresher mind.
I am so frustrated by the wasted potential that LA Noire has. It deserves to be a much better game, it has all the pieces to be a much better game, but based on what we have, it sadly receives a bronze bolt for gameplay.
With a killer presentation and some dead gameplay, it looks like we're really riding on the story to save this one. LA Noire puts you into the shoes of Detective Cole Phelps, a young World War II veteran working his way up the ladder at the LAPD. Over the course of the game, he works his way from being a beat cop to solving cases in the traffic, homicide, and vice divisions, each time working with a new partner.
Cole quickly becomes a rising star within the department due to his knack for piecing together cases and solving mysteries no other cop could dream of. During cases, the overarching plot moves at a snail's pace, with the early cases feeling like a serialized crime drama, where each episode is independent of one another. Even though Cole absolutely speeds through some departments, the game never feels like it gets going, so it never really draws you in.
I think part of that is because in between cases, you're treated to these flashback sequences, showing Cole's time in Okinawa during the war. Over the course of the game, we learn the backstory behind Cole's Silver Star commendation, but we only learn it in these sections, in the most disjointed way possible. And then on top of both our main plot and the World War II subplot, there's a third plot playing out within these optional newspaper cutscenes.
All three of these do come together near the end of the game, and in many ways they come together well enough, but it still feels rushed despite the fact that it's been cooking for 15 hours at that point. Even by the time you're nearing the final mission, the game story doesn't feel like it moves past the first act.
Cole himself is filled with incredibly odd character choices. He's closed off and mysterious, both to his partners and the players controlling him. Despite playing as him for nearly the entire game, we never see him at leisure, only on the job. If you miss it during an early scene, you wouldn't even know until probably halfway into the game that Cole's married with kids. There are entire chunks that are kept from us as players, not just from the war, but even entire scenes that we physically enter and leave in-game. He's our protagonist, and clearly based on his unbending focus on enforcing the law, he's meant to be somebody that we can try and relate to over the course of the plot. Choosing to make him not only a flat character, but one that we as players don't even know just hurts the story overall.
Cole's issues notwithstanding, the cast of characters we meet throughout the game is varied, mostly well written, and arguably one of the game's high points. Often characters will come back over the course of the game. They could be old partners of yours showing up for a crossover case, an old suspect reappearing, or even smaller characters reappearing as subtle hints towards future plot points. By the end of his time at Vice, Cole is caught cheating on his wife.
Oh yeah, he has a wife.
With a German singer named Elsa.
Wait, did you say Elsa? I have an idea.
Elsa? Do you wanna be unfaithful? I think it would be smart. We only see Marie like once. Don't be a dunce. Now go and bone that tramp. You'll only get demoted. No reason why. And you might just even die. Do you wanna be unfaithful? Protects the Duckle's faith now.
After Roy secretly rats him out to the news to cover up a bigger story, Phelps is demoted down to the lowest of the low, the arson squad.
This is the most egregious plot point in the entire game for me. We don't get to hear what Cole is thinking, why he decides to cheat on his wife. We get nothing close to an answer here. Even later, the answers we get are paltry. All we hear is that he and Elsa helped one another emotionally, but we don't hear why Cole couldn't just confide in his wife. Is it pride? Just say that then. I think the idea is that because Elsa is already a broken person, Cole can talk to her about how he's secretly broken too. One could see that as a deeper theme to be searched and found, but with so little context given, I just see it as sloppy writing. After the entire game up until this point paints Cole as a perfectly by-the-books guy, this single moment slaps that and the players in the face in the name of intrigue. It's not as if we see before or after this point that Cole is devolving from good cop to bad cop. It is one single moment.
Leaving a leading playable character mysterious like this very rarely works, and it just makes me disconnect from the plot even more than the pacing already does. When your character is doing things that you don't want them to, especially in a game that allows for player choice and branching paths throughout, that's always going to be super jarring. Some games spin this to their advantage, but in LA Noire it just comes off as really clumsy.
While working on Arson Squad, Cole uncovers a potential conspiracy. A group called the Suburban Redevelopment Fund may be paying arsonists to burn down the houses of any family that doesn't agree to their buyouts. This is where Fontaine comes back into the picture. Using the money that he no longer had to spend on legally buying morphine for his patients, he, along with the city, local building companies, a local insurance company, and even everybody's least favorite dirty cop, Roy Earl, had built up a massive insurance scam using these houses. They would as cheaply as possible build up tons of veteran housing communities. And then when the federal government came in and bought up all of that land to build a planned highway, they would make a killing off of the increased property values. Phelps, knowing he can't take this down alone with the police force's dirty cops trying to keep him away from it, begins working with another former squad mate, Jack Kelso. Kelso happens to be working for the very same insurance company that's insuring the redevelopment project. Together, the two make one massive effort to take down the arsonist that Fontaine had been manipulating and bust open the whole plan for the rest of the world to see.
It turns out that the arsonist was yet another squad mate of Cole and Jack's. This one, who had been living in the LA drainage system, had been driven insane after being ordered indirectly by Cole to light a Japanese hospital on fire back in the war.
After Jack puts the former comrade out of his misery, he, Cole, and Elsa try to escape. After Jack and Elsa are safely lifted out of the drainage system, Cole says goodbye and is swept up by the rushing water. Afterwards, delivering his eulogy is none other than Roy Earl.
This ending has always been fairly controversial, and with good reason. In isolation, it's actually quite a logical ending for the game. The City of Angels is corrupt, unfair, and unforgiving, and no matter how hard Cole tries, it's inevitable that he will fail. The abrupt nature of the ending is absolutely intentional. I mean, how many games kill off the leading character by simply making them get hit by a wave? But even then, it's still too abrupt. The game hasn't done enough to make you care about Cole. In fact, by this point in the game, you may as well want to see him die, so while there's shock value through how surprising his death is, there's not really an emotional punch to go with it. It's an ending that's meant to make you feel frustrated, but you feel frustrated more because it's not deserved than anything else.
I'm gonna keep coming back to this. It takes 20 hours to get here. And while the moment-to-moment storytelling may be fine enough, LA Noire essentially jumps from Act 1 to 3 in an instant. I genuinely do enjoy the intrigue behind LA Noire's narrative. I can respect the slow burn that it takes to get to where it wants to be, but it never quite hits the mark that I wanted it to. The interweaving of not 2, but 3 major plot lines is impressive and incredibly well done when it does occur. It just occurs far too late and with far too many other issues that I can't overlook. Too much is skimmed over in a game this long with this much downtime between major plot points.
Just like the detailed faces being attached to lifeless bodies and the game's mechanics being jaggedly thrown together with no central sticking point, it almost feels like the entire story is wrapping around a core that just isn't there.
This was one of the tougher scores that I can ever recall giving to date. Both of us kept going back and forth because we wanted to like this plot enough to give it a silver bolt, but the flaws are there and we can't look past them just because we want to like it more. For its story, LA Noire receives a bronze bolt. And that, folks, is LA Noire. Thanks again to Minnie for joining me for this video. It's always been a blast working with you over on your channel, and it was just as much fun working with you here on mine.
Hey Bolt, thanks for having me on. I've always wanted an opportunity to complain about LA Noire, and this is it. Me and Bol have done a few videos over on my channel Minimme. We just did one on 5 graphically impressive PS1 games, and we've done a second video on that in the past, and we did a video on ugly PS4 games, so if you want to check that out, I hope Bolt puts a link in the description. Yeah, this was fun to do, and thanks for having me.
If you want to see any of those videos that Minnie and I did together over on his channel, they'll be down in the description below or on the end cards in a moment. As always, thank you very much for watching and stay golden.